just going back to the question of my relationship with my dad, obviously his passing did affect my mental health. And I do believe that a lot of aggression arose within me because I started repelling at home. I started being, rebellious. I started not listening to my stepdad. He was a wonderful man, but I started, you're not my dad.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And only after my father passed away. And when you're in that moment, you seem like this rebellious young girl that's so disrespectful. But I was going through, now that I'm older and I'm wiser, I know exactly that. That's how I was dealing with my mental illness at that time. That's how I was challenged.
You know, every time there's a lady on the platform, we always have a different vibe. And of course, we at Kim Yard, once again, this is our second episode that we're doing here. And I've always kind of wanted to do something around Women's Month, maybe with my mother, maybe with someone I know personally. But I haven't really had a lady who's kind of shown the kind of interest that my guest here has shown today. Because I woke up some morning and I found like a bunch of likes on our social media. And I'm like, okay, we're blowing up now. And then I check, I'm like, okay, it's a lady. And it's very interesting because I've had a lot of compliments from ladies. And they'll do it on social media, whereas guys will tell me personally when they see me, right? So it's a very interesting one. But before I get too wrapped up in that story, I'd like to officially welcome Nekisha James. How are you?
Hey, I'm well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, it's such an awesome pleasure to have you here because, you know, there's a whole story behind who you are. And of course, you're a finalist, top 30 finalist for Mrs. South Africa.
Yes, I am.
And how's that experience?
So it's been an absolutely uncomfortable experience. It's been incredibly uncomfortable, but we do understand. We have good understanding that where there's, where you feel uncomfortable, it sort of means there's growth happening. So I love it. I love that there's growth, there's change, and it's very exciting.
Man, that's such a wonderful one. Let's now maybe get a bit of background on who Nekisha is, because most people would probably watch this, or some of the people who listen, or most of our listeners will be like, but yeah, okay, KG, so why do you have Mrs. SA here? Are you trying to campaign here? What's going on, right? But like I said in the beginning, there's a deeper story to why you're here. And so give us a bit of background.
Okay, so I am Nekisha Lupke, and I am originally from Durban, KZN, currently living in Centurion, Gauteng. And I'm married. It's going to be 5 years now, and I have 3 amazing kids. My son is my eldest, and I have 2 little girls, 5 and 2 years old. I'm an educator and an ESL coach. And then
and by ESL, what do you mean by ESL?
ESL is teaching English or educating English as a second language. So basically, I get students prepared for business presentations. I specifically specialize in business English. So what I do is get students ready for business presentations, interviews, and stuff like that.
Beautiful, man. So there's a lot of working with people involved in what you do. And I mean, I almost kind of looking at that, I could kind of see in, while we were sharing before we started recording, in the stuff you're interested in, and it's so people focused, right?
Of course, yes.
And then there's also a funny one, which we've spoken about with my partner quite a bit. There's this idea of having pretty privilege, right?
It's real. Pretty privilege is real. It is real.
And how do you deal with that? Like people just assuming that she's just a pretty face and there isn't much more to offer, right? Yeah. So how do you navigate that conversation?
Okay. So firstly, let me say that pretty privilege definitely does exist, and I think my way around it, because I feel like I've felt it for myself, but how I get around it is to express myself through speaking, because that's my strong point and it's my strength. So I think it's really cool to be liked, or to be liked because of the way I look. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I believe in essence. So you got to be more than a pretty face, you know. At the end of the day, we can like people on face value. And I do believe in presenting yourself well, showing up, always showing up, looking your best externally, because first impressions do last. I mean, you know, the eyes, I always say your eye is a window, you know, it's a window. And yeah, I truly believe that appearance does count, but essentially there has to be substance, there has to be essence. So I'd ultimately say that pretty privilege is real, but at the end of the day, it's the 2% of what you actually see. There's so much more to a woman than her exterior, the way she looks, the way she looks externally, her face, her body. There's a lot more to that, and I do hope that pretty girls see that in themselves, and they see themselves as more than that as well.
Wow. I love that. I love the confidence.
Yes, you gotta be.
Okay, so I mean, besides the pretty face that people will see, talking about the backstory, you obviously grew up in an environment that doesn't really sort of represent how you look.
Absolutely.
so loosely speaking.
Absolutely. So basically, I'm a coloured, which means I'm a little bit of everything, and that's the amazing thing about being a coloured. You know, I have a little bit of black, I have a little bit of white, I have a bit of Indian. So I'm literally a mixed of. I'm literally the perfect description of the Rainbow Nation, right? But what I'd like to add and to say is that with my upbringing and growing up in a coloured community, dominantly coloured community, it is represented, and it actually does have a lot, which South Africa is actually sadly represented by a big part of South Africa is violent, aggressive, poverty-stricken, and so forth. So this is not just accustomed to the coloured community. It's overall a South African thing. However, based off of what I know and my own experience in a dominantly coloured community, you don't have to look far for poverty. You can literally look outside of your bedroom window and find substance abuse, poverty, violence. You don't have to look far. And I believe that growing up in a community as such, it prepares you for Mrs. South Africa. But honestly, it prepares you. You know, I'm a firm believer in adversity being your character builder. So when you grow up in an unfortunate background, inevitably the fighter in you is produced. You cannot run away from it, not unless you become accustomed to your environment, which obviously does happen to a big part of our South Africans or our fellow neighbors. But if you have a mind, or you have loving, I would like to say, if you have a loving home where you have parents, because you can have you can grow up in a unfortunate environment, but if you have a loving home and supportive parents that reassure you when you are unable to reassure yourself, when you don't really understand what your environment is actually doing to you, if you have a supportive family, let me not even say a mother and a father, because there's people that do not have a mom and a dad, but maybe had a grandparent or an aunt who brought them up. But if you have that love, or a teacher and support to tell you that there is more to life than your current circumstance or situation, then absolutely, you know, I like I said, I'm a firm believer in purpose and adversity being your character builder. So when you come from an unfortunate background, you can only use it to your advantage. And I hope that in me actually doing things that are bigger than myself, I believe are bigger than myself. Yeah, I really just do hope that the people who know me from home are inspired, and, you know, that they can see that it doesn't really matter where you come from. You know, And I believe that Zosie, she really broke barriers, and there was something awakened inside of me when I heard her. You know, the school she went to, my mom taught, she's from Tsolo, and my mom taught in a school in Tsolo, and that's where Zosie's from. So it just felt so aligned, and it's like, you know what? If Zosie can do this, I can do it too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that story. And, you know, I'm listening to how you explaining your childhood. Although there was adversity, right? Although there was challenges, there's a love and a pride that comes from, you know, the experiences that you had. So we always look at the violence in communities and how it affects our mental health. Right?
Absolutely.
But there's the inverse of that as well, is there's also so much more love there, which is different from, I guess, the community you experience in suburbia or sort of more advanced communities.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So how can you talk? Let's talk now about sort of your mental health or the state of your mental health. If you can remember at that time, right? You know, here's all of this violence, but you also have like the beautiful, you know, community around.
Of course.
Who was your support system in that?
Okay, so let's just ring up mental health. If we're going to be talking about mental health back in our childhood, we didn't even know that is something that exists. Like, if we're going to be honest and real, mental health is not spoken about.
Yeah.
You know, all we know is nobody cares. You need to man up. You need to put what girls say, you know, what we hear a lot, a saying in English, we say this, you need to put your big girl panties on and handle yourself. You know, there's no time for crying. There's no time for pity. We just got to move on. These are the.
I'm so sorry to cut you. I love what you brought there with that. Put your big girl panties on, because that's actually a version of women's manning up.
Exactly,
right? Okay.
Absolutely, and that is why I'm saying it. You know, I'm really a firm believer of speaking truth and bringing to life the little. Because we'll sit and we'll think, okay, so where did the notion or where did the connotation come from of us believing that vulnerability is a weakness, believing that mental health is not to be spoken about, because we get told to man up in all these subliminal, all these different little ways of these little sayings that our grandparents said or that our mom said, and then we don't realize that it's conditioning our minds to believe and to think that, hey, I gotta be a big girl about this. And yes, we do.
Sure.
But I'm a firm believer there's a time and a place for everything. There's a time to be strong and to show up confident. There's a time to keep moving. And there's a time to be strong, but there's also a time to be vulnerable. So if we need to cry, we gotta cry. If we want to say that we do not have the emotional capacity in this moment, I need help, I need somebody to speak to, then we cannot be putting big girl panties on in that moment. We need somebody that's actively and present, not to tell us what to do, but I believe to listen. And I may not have always had that person, but again, in my own experience, I did grow up in a loving and supporting home. So I did have somebody to speak to that, you know what, things are going to be okay. This is a season. This will not last forever. Things are going to be okay. So I had somebody speaking life into me at the time. I come from a loving home. I have a mother. I have sisters. I have a dad. I have like one or two cousins that I'm very close with. Just maybe two cousins that I'm very close with. And they know how to speak life into each other. We know how to speak life into each other. But other people may not have that. So then who do you run to? In that, you know, who do you go to if you don't have a support system at home?
Sure.
Schooling. That's where I believe schooling is. Every child goes to school. Well, at least every child should be going to school. So that's when I say there should really be a separate entity for mental health in schools, whether it should be a subject, whether it should be a program that is put into the educational systems. Yes. And I know it may be this feather in the wind right now, because I do believe I'm probably not the first person that's thought about this before or that had this idea that mental health awareness is something that we need to push out into the world, not just South Africa, but ultimately somebody, I'm actually having a visual in my mind as I'm speaking. I'm actually having a visual of something flying in the air and it needs an anchor to be held down. Yeah. So ideas are floating like a feather in the wind, but it's going to take a solid group of people, warriors that are influential and truly have a passion for change. Catalyst of change is what I'm hoping, to be with Mrs. SA, or even as a standing woman on my own, is to be a catalyst of change and to actually create the change that I've sought to in myself.
Sure.
Sort of take that and start planting it onto everybody else around me. Yeah.
Man, I love what you said about a community of people. You didn't say one person who's going to change, but you looked at it as it needs to be a group, a collective of people, right? Because,
absolutely.
There's that saying, if you want to go far, I forgot, if you want to go far, go whatever.
Yes.
I'll rephrase that. But, I'm butchering it right now. But, it takes community, like you were saying, to raise someone. So at the end of the day, it's not like when someone leaves home and goes to school, like the parenting stops there.
Absolutely.
Right? It needs to be you being parented in every aspect while you're still a kid,
absolutely.
A child, a daughter. But you also had a very great relationship with your father.
Absolutely, yes, I did.
Who had a very influential impact on where
absolutely.
faith, religion, prayer, that type of stuff was instilled in you. So tell me a little bit about that.
So basically, just before we talk about my dad, I'd like to just extend the fact that my mom and dad were divorced by the time I was about 2 or 3 years old already. And so I lived with my mom, and she is definitely the anchor as to where I am, and a big part of who I am now, a major part of who I am now, in fact. And my dad played a part in my life spiritually. He was a friend, but I do believe he's passed away. He was taken away at a very critical time of my life. And what I do hold on to is the lessons that I learned through him. I'd say I had a fantastic relationship with him because I was still in my growing little girl phase. So he was like this superhero in front of me. And I believe that a lot of my characteristics I've developed from him. And he was such a phenomenal man of faith. I've never seen someone have faith or believe. I'm yet to meet that person, who's so in love with God. And I think that's one of the things that I learned from him. And even though I didn't know much about faith at the time, but now that I'm older and I've had my own spiritual encounters and my own encounters with God, I believe that that's where it stemmed from.
Sure.
And even in my household with my mom, it was like church was number one. It's a non-negotiable. No matter what you do on a Saturday night, you got to show up at church on a Saturday, And we grew up and we had prayer meetings on a Tuesday. But with my father, it was a bit different because he was also into ministry. So I think that's where I got to see him be a man of faith. And my dad actually passed away of a full-blown AIDS, I should say. And I think that as a growing child, it was an extremely traumatic thing to deal with at the time. But again, suppressed emotions because, you lost your father on Friday, you went to his funeral on Saturday, and on Monday you went back to school.
Wow.
And that's what it was. Nobody asked me how I felt. Besides my mom, I'm not talking about my mom. Besides home, you don't really have anyone that's going to check up on you. You've still got to show up for your test. You still got to write your test.
Yeah.
You still got to go to school and deal with bullies. When I used to get bullied for being black. the ghetto Keisha comes out, you know? It's like, no, don't call me black. Like, you know, this is my pride. This is me, you know? And growing up in an aggressive community, you're taught to fight. You're just taught to fight for the wrong things because you cannot back down when somebody calls you black. So you're going to leave us to call you black, you know? Right. And it's something that we can also, you know, it's something that we all quite familiar with that type of experience, but people just don't like to talk about it because we all want to pretend like we've been eloquent our whole lives and we've been confident our whole lives. And honestly, we are all in this pursuit of becoming, you know, it's never going to be a perfection, always progression. And I'm a firm believer in unlearning things that are not serving you and unlearning things that are obviously going to hinder your future and hinder your character. But ultimately, to where I am now, I look back and it's like everything that was probably set in my past or everything that I've been through has literally led me to the strong, confident woman that I am today, leading from my home upbringing, my dad, the loss of my dad, and everything else that you go through in school, you know, trauma. And I do believe that most of us, you know, everybody talks about being bullied at school and stuff. I feel like most kids go through it, just that it's normalized. You know, it's normalized. It's so normal. But it's about how we deal with it after. And just going back to the question of my relationship with my dad, obviously his passing did affect my mental health. And I do believe that a lot of aggression arose within me because I started repelling at home. I started being, rebellious. I started not listening to my stepdad. He was a wonderful man, but I started, you know, my dad. Don't tell me what to do. And only after my father passed away. And when you're in that moment, you seem like this rebellious young girl that's so disrespectful. But I was going through, now that I'm older and I'm wiser, I know exactly that. That's how I was dealing with my mental illness at that time. That's how I was challenged. And I don't think anyone saw that. But like I said, there was a lot of aggression in me because of that. And I only learned to know that later on when I became learned and I did a lot of research, and that's where the passion for mental health mental health awareness came about, was actually having to go through an experience, have personal awareness, and then self-acceptance, because I had to accept that I had an issue. And then I believe after having acceptance, I knew that I needed to talk to somebody, you know, like, girl, you need to talk to someone. And so that's what I did. And I believe that speaking to people is therapy, whether you like it or not. And even if you're uncomfortable while you're having the conversation, you do not know that there is healing, so much healing. And then I cannot for the life of me ever sit and talk about healing and personal development and my growth without mentioning God, because ultimately my entire foundation of personal development, mental health, is God. Because there came a time where I was not able to cope and deal on my daily tasks. I would go to work and I couldn't focus, and I knew that I had issues, and I went to see a doctor, and she actually prescribed me antidepressants, and I took these for a while. And it sort of numbs you to your situation. And I feel like it helped me. It did. But what ended up happening, I started getting addicted to, that was like, if I could say, that was my glass of wine. Or that was my cigarette. Or that was my escape. If I run out of pills, it's like, you know what, you know what, it may be different for everybody, but this was my situation. Until one day I actually ended up landing up in hospital at work. I just dropped at work. I think it was 2013, maybe. 20 could have been 2012, 2013. And just going through the motions, not being able to cope at work, having friendships. And that's another thing that we don't set our youth up for is for failure. You know, people think they're going to finish school, they're going to do matric, they're going to pass, and then they're going to go straight into university, and they don't realize that you're going to go to a job and you're going to get the job. Rejection and dealing with rejection, you have to be mentally strong for that. And I feel like after dealing with the loss of my father, then I got into a relationship, and then it's like, a boy breaking up with me? No. Oh my goodness, right. That's another kind of rejection, especially and it's not spoken about, because rejection from a relationship when you just finished school or you are still in your the prime of your youth, you've never felt what it feels like to fall in love and be head over heels, and then he decides, girl, it's just not doing it for me now. Do you understand? Yeah. Mental health, nobody talks about that.
Oh, man.
And then it's another rejection, and then 2 weeks after your breakup and this man or this guy leaves you, and then now you go for a job interview and you don't get the job, and it's like, rejection again? What's wrong with me? Why? What is wrong, you know? And then you fall into this rabbit hole of not being enough, not measuring, you're comparing yourself to other people. Then you get to a point of, what is the purpose of my existence? Why is this happening to me? And I believe that I did reach a point where I had been through everything that was to my destruction. And that's when I had been diagnosed, and that I was in depression, and I was prescribed these meds. And it was such a time, because I would take these meds and I was fine and I was chill and I would operate at work. And one day I was sitting at work, and I was working night shift, and I was sitting we had this lobby, the lobby. And I was sitting at the lobby, and I just passed out.
Wow.
I literally just passed out. And I remember they had to call the ambulance, and I woke up in hospital. And why? Because I took too many pills, but so it wasn't necessarily suicide. It could have been, but it was sort of an overdose of having the feeling of feeling like everything's okay and this is helping me. So it was an obsession. Yes, obsession. I'll take 2 in the morning. So I don't only feel good in the morning. I want to feel good in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. Never mind what the doctor said. I just need to feel good. And so taking it in the morning, and then obviously waking up in hospital, it's like, okay, Lord, I can't do this anymore. This is a mental fight. This is a spiritual fight. I can't do this by myself. I need help. I need to help myself,
Oh, wow.
And so I walked out of the hospital that day. Things were not perfect. Life issues were still there. But I had to gain the mental strength to face life and face the challenges for what they are, and to see that, you know what? Life is going to be crappy at times. But I cannot use it to validate me. And I feel like that's what youth needs to understand, is that you need to validate yourself while you're still on the pursuit. I cannot sit here and feel like whatever happens, if I lose my job, if something bad happens, or if I am not at my pinnacle, whatever that may be, I cannot use that to validate where I am right now, because just me being Nekisha in my essence is good enough. And that's all I need to be, and all I need to show up as every single day. And if I can be that, then I'm enough. And so whenever I think of youth and I think of what I've been through, honestly, that's where mental health needs to go back. Mental health awareness needs to go back to school, because the youth is not prepared for what adulting is all about. Adulting is not, we can all say adulting is just...
Well, we always see it on our social media, I'm tired of adulting.
And again, look at again, we talk about adulting, but in what way? In this vague, funny, meme kind of a way, right? It's never a core. Like, adulting is this. When I say adulting, it's because I just had to put 4 new tires on my car and I didn't plan for it. You know? Do you understand what I'm saying?
That's not even the depths of it. That's like stuff that you should at least know that as a human being. Like, you drive a car, at least know how to fix a tire.
Exactly. But when your tire breaks down and you don't make it for your job interview and now you don't get the job, and now you start fighting with yourself. I should have, I could have. Mental health issues right there. You know, so it starts in the mundane. I truly believe that mental health, if it's detected early, or if people understand that mental health illnesses, right? Mental health illnesses are in the mundane, everyday living. The trivial things that like I'm saying, your 4 tires, something happens. How are you able to handle stress? That's what mental health is. Or do we have emotional capacity to deal with pressure? You know? And it can be, for me, for you would say, if you have a car, you know, it's something that you should know. No, I have a husband that works like in another city, you know? So for me, when I have tire problems, you know, I still have to breathe. Okay, breathe. Okay, breathe. Mental health. Who are we gonna call now? Everything's gonna be okay. Okay, so who do I call? You know, so it's different for everybody. And I truly do believe that it's in the mundane, and we've got to go back and teach our youth about rejection. We've got to teach our youth about how to handle rejection, and to read books on mental health awareness, but also to teach youth on emotional intelligence is such a big thing. And it's not talked about as much as I would have liked to, or maybe it was being spoken about in the classroom and I wasn't listening. Yeah, maybe.
No, I think you know, whenever I think of like classroom discussions and stuff we did at school, there's a certain format that certain people understand or relate to.
Absolutely.
Right? So, you know, we talk about communication styles almost.
Yes.
If you're going to teach me in a class about mental health and we're all just sitting down, we're not doing something that actually engages the body too, then I'm probably not going to be engaged, you know. So I also think as much as we want to get these programs done, there's also the method and how we deliver it that's also important, right?
Absolutely.
They certain kids will say they have ADHD. It's like, okay, let's look at what he ate in the morning. You know, what does this kid come from? You know, what are we feeding him at school? That could also contribute. So there's so many different levels to that.
Absolutely, there is. Yeah.
I love it, man. And you made some incredible points there. And I'm trying to like
I'm
pull
so
down
sorry.
one right now. Don't even be sorry. I'm
I'm literally about to say I'm going to take over your whole podcast because people that know me, I will not stop talking.
No, but you know, what I got from all of that really is there's something that you also said there is good enough. I think we don't stress that enough to people, right? I've been on this mission now of giving myself permission, right? To do the things that I've kind of been scared to do. Being on a podcast, like I'm not a out there kind of person. And it's interesting, you're like, I thought you'd have a bigger following. I'm like, no, this is who I am, right? But that still doesn't dictate whether the podcast should go
never, because
I don't have a platform. It's still
absolutely.
Like, no, I have it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's this quote I thought of when we were speaking is, to dare is to lose one's footing temporarily. To not dare is to lose oneself. And this is
Can you say that again, please?
So to dare is
to dare. Okay. To dare
is to lose one's footing temporarily.
Right.
And to not dare is to lose oneself.
Okay.
So in essence, I think that to me means, you know, if you don't put yourself out there, you're just gonna stay in this one place, right? You're not gonna grow. You're not gonna experience the hardships. You're not gonna experience failure. You're not gonna go through the ups and downs. Everything in your life will be just, you know, very salient. Yes. And then until you hit this big rock at 40, 50, and then you have problems, mental health issues.
They say the price of regrets is a lot more. is a lot more expensive than the price of failure. And I mean, how did we get to meet? A simple DM, like, you just got to put yourself out there.
Right.
Like, what's the worst that can happen? A person's probably going to ignore you, or they'll say no. But then you move on and you just keep going. And I think that I do believe that that's a strength that you get once you put yourself out there enough. It becomes like literally water off a duck's back.
Sure.
You just got to keep rolling. Like, okay, no, all right, on to the next one. Because you're going to get a yes eventually if you keep going, right? Yeah.
So now, I also want to backtrack to your sort of overdosing on the feel good pills, right?
Wow. Yeah.
and that also kind of feeds into a family member that
Yes.
died by suicide.
Yes.
You know, it's a very sensitive topic.
Yes,
and I
absolutely.
know, you know, family sometimes we don't really want our people to be known in those terms because of the secrecy around it. And I respect that completely. But I just want to know how, you know, suicide ideation and your sister's passing kind of affected you. I mean, you had some thoughts or some attempts here and there.
Absolutely.
And you know, what was that experience like?
Okay, so in essence, what I've learned from her passing is solely to try to be more present in the moment. And I also do believe that I've learned to try your best. Okay, I do understand that, yes, we should have boundaries, but to avail yourself to the people that are around you. Okay, I know that we're not superheroes, we cannot be everywhere.
Sure.
But I'm talking specifically about your friend group, your close friend group, your parents, your circle. Check up on people. We're living in a society that's all driven to self now. And I understand it. I do. You've got to have your boundaries about what calls you can take, when and how. But don't be too self-centered. We are living in a self-centered driven, self-care, self-help, self. Where's the service? We are not born for self. We are born to be of service. And extending yourself to others. And it really does, you know, I know this is not a faith. I don't know if, you know, I sometimes try not to talk too much about faith. Just because, even though I know it's okay, but just because there's people from a wider spectrum, and I would love everybody to reel in.
Yes, okay, I get that.
But ultimately, if you are a spiritual person, you cannot live a self-centered life. And when I say self-centered, it's like sometimes you don't feel like taking people's calls, genuinely. And it happens all the time. Like, I don't want to have to deal with this person right now because of my mental health. Okay, okay, your mental health. But can you just take the call for 2 minutes and handle it? Like, you rather tell the person. And that's what I've learned to do now. I take the call and I say, listen, this is what I listen to see if the person that needs my time and attention at this moment, if what they need right now is something that I can deal with, then I try to, see if I can help. But if I can't and I don't have the capacity, I let it be known that, listen, I cannot deal with this right now. Maybe, I'm just not, because of the self-driven world we're living in now. Everything is like, I don't answer calls from this time to that time. No, babes. If my discernment is off and something tells me to answer that call, I'm going to answer the call. And like I say, maybe it's just my experience. Maybe it's just my experience that makes me think like that. But why do you need to have an experience to allow you to think like that? You know, sometimes answering the call may save a person's life. And that's just one of the things that I've learned. But overall, how I've had to deal with her passing. It's a very sad thing, you know, because even though she's passed, I still feel like she's here. So I feel like I don't deal with it. You know, I feel like we just get by every day and hope that she's okay. And I feel like it was never something that I ever imagined speaking about on a public platform in my life, just because it's so fragile. But then again, back to faith. When God tells you or He puts something on your heart, you know, I believe in things happening in vain. And if you don't learn from something, it's happening in vain. If you have a traumatic experience, if, for example, let's make it an everyday practical example. If you do not study for a test and you fail that test, now you're dealing with the consequences of failing and having to rewrite the test, right? Sorry, I'm a teacher. This is how I do things. But ultimately, if you look at your consequence and say, okay, so what could I have done better? How can I now change my outcome? What are you going to do? Organize your life, set a schedule, study. Then we pass. So I believe that life is like that. And we endured or are enduring having this experience. So for us, it's like, okay, so what have we learned through this? And for me, it's taking care of my mental health, speaking when I need to speak. I will call my best friend if I need to. I will go on my knees and pray when I need to. I will be self-aware and know that I have a problem, that I'm being toxic right now. And I'm not always pointing a finger at everyone that's toxic around me, because we're living in a culture where I'm just letting go of toxic people. No. I'm toxic. Can I say I'm toxic? You know, can I have self-awareness and take accountability?
And give some people grace, man.
Give people, I love that word. Grace. Give people more grace. Give yourself grace.
Exactly.
And so just in finishing, I'd just like to say that, and that is why I am growing to learn that, okay, this is what's happened. These are the consequences. We're dealing. Okay. We're overcoming. This is overcoming because we're able to talk about it now. This must mean healing. Okay. The phrase that is so highlighted in my mind, I've never felt like I was aligned with the phrase before, but now it feels like every day I wake up, turning pain to purpose. How can I use my story? How can I use this thing that hurt me, that crushed me, that I didn't understand? How can I use it to sort of help someone else that possibly is dealing with the same thing? And I feel like if I don't do that, then that experience, that healing, that pain is in vain. Wasted in vain. How can I help? Let's talk about it. It's not easy. My knees are shaking. I have a lump in my throat, but we have to do it. So that's the road. That is the process. I'm in the process. And that is where I'm heading, is having more conversations, being vulnerable, and finding strength in that. Hoping to touch somebody or to help someone.
Man, I'm sure someone who's gonna hear this or who's listening to this will agree, that, you might not know it in the moment. We spoke about this, that a lot of stuff lands on us much later, when it's like that when a student is ready, the teacher appears, right? Or when you ask the right questions, then eventually the answers will come to you. They don't come in that moment. So I also love what you're saying is, I often get into that. Like, I've just gotten too many people on my phone. Like, can I just chill? So I'm guilty of that a lot of times. Mm-hmm. But interesting, yesterday I was sitting with a friend of mine and we were talking about someone who's going through something, who also just lost his father. And, I said to him that, man, I was with this guy the other day and I could see, man, there's something wrong with him, right? He's not okay. And he just needs someone to talk to. And my friend was like, well, man, I can't believe you're saying that, because one of my neighbors also saying the same thing about the same guy. Mm-hmm. So then I also realized that, okay, I guess we're also not listening to people enough. We're talking about listening to the youth, people who have problems, because then we're too concerned with our own stuff.
Exactly.
Right? And then, he's too drunk. I don't wanna listen to that, because, this guy is a bother. But a few days later or months later down the line, we might hear of this guy doing something that possibly harms him. Yes. And now we left with that feeling of, but he came to me and he asked and I was never there for him.
Exactly. And what I can say though, as much as you've got to make yourself available, understand that you cannot fix everybody, right? Now, what I've done, I recently, about 2 months ago, I had someone who, was speaking about their problem and definitely depressed. Sure. 100%. Sure. It's actually at a point where, lots of people don't even know that they're depressed, right? There's different types of depression. Mm-hmm. But I'm specifically speaking about somebody where the condition is now obvious. In your speech, in your posture, in your tone. I could see the depression. I could hear the depression. I could feel it. I literally had to tell him and say, listen, I can sit and give you all the wisdom that I can, but you need professional help. And I'm saying this with love. You need, I always tell people that are dealing with day-to-day life issues that there's 2 things that you need. You need a mixture, a dose of theology and a dose of therapy. You need a dose of the 2. You cannot have one and not have the other. It goes together. And if somebody comes to me with an issue that I have no expertise in or experience, how do I can feel your pain and I can be an ear to listen and I will provide that for you in that moment. But after that, you need to now, because remember, action, it's with self-awareness. Yeah. You have now got to go and take initiative for yourself and your own mental health, because ultimately it's with you. And now you've got to go and seek the help that you need. So if you feel, or if I'm going to tell you, listen, you need therapy, understand that it's coming from a place of love. And I'm not saying that you're crazy, because that's what society has that's what society has told us. How can you say I need therapy? I don't need therapy. I'm not crazy. No,
it's not for crazy people.
There's somebody that has the intellect and the expertise to help you recondition your mind and open up old wounds that the possibility is going to be broader to be able to fix. Because sometimes there's things that we're dealing with that we didn't know. We don't understand. We don't even know we're dealing with it. I was angry. I was aggressive. Oh, come at me. I'm going to come for you too. But I didn't know where that came from, that aggression. Where did it come from? Losing my dad and being angry at the world. Well, if my dad passed away, well, whatever. God is not there. He's not listening to me. My best friend has a dad and he's saved and he loves the Lord, but he's living. Why my dad? I don't care. If you say I'm black, oh, well, you black too.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? And I'll call you out. And people don't talk about it as often as they should. And like I said, people grow up and become eloquent and we become confident and we pretend that we were always this way. We know it took a lot of work, self-awareness, reflection, introspection, reading the Bible, praying, midnight oil, crying, to get to be the person that you are. Because under all the makeup, with all the pretty privileges you have, what is your essence? What did you have to do to become the person that you are now? You know? So back to your question about pretty privilege and how it's worked for me, it hasn't really worked that much. I feel like it's more of my communication that works more for me. But ultimately, just going back to youth and going back to answering the call, see how you can help someone, especially the young people. See how you can help them. And once you can see that, sometimes you got to tell them, hey, go and speak to your mom and dad about it. Have you had a conversation with your parents? Have you listened to your mom and dad? Because sometimes the youth also feel like their world's coming to an end when their parents say no, or when their parents are a bit hard on them. They feel like their parents hate them. No, listen to your mom and dad. Because there's things, I promise you, somebody asked me, Nekisha, if you could go back into time, what would you change? Do you know, the thing that I would change is definitely, I would listen to my mom more. Young people, listen to your parents. There's so much trauma that you do not have to experience if you just listen to your mother or your father. It's almost like, I just have to take it here. It's almost like God telling us sex before marriage is forbidden. What do we human beings do? We play the field and we do the most, right? And we are disobedient to God, just like a child, a youth being disobedient to their parents. Now you have to suffer with consequences of soul ties, heartbreak, and all of these things. When God did do it this way, we did not listen. So there's trauma that has self-sabotaged my own growth, my own mental health, all because I was disobedient and I did not want to listen. So if you want to look at it in a spiritual way, that's how we are disobedient. But let's look at the mundane, listening to your mother and father. So sometimes when your nephew calls you and he's like, you know, my life is coming to an end and my parents don't get me and they don't understand me. So what did your mom say? Okay, and how do you feel? Now I need you to get off the phone with me and go and talk to your mom about this. Listen to your mother. Sometimes it's as simple as that, and your mental health will be okay. Don't have a boyfriend. Don't fall in love. Don't have a boyfriend. What did we do?
We just did everything.
Next thing we're singing Rihanna, right? There's a thug in my life, and I'm not gonna tell my mama. And we're thriving. And then when the thug is not good for your mental health,
then we go back to mom, right?
Exactly. So if I could go, with youth, I say that it's education, but it's also in your everyday choices. Let's start with listening to our parents. If I could go back into my childhood, there's so much trauma that I had to endure, all because I was just a disobedient child. And I feel like we can all go back and we can all think of that thing that our parents told us not to do and we did it anyway. Right?
And what it did to us.
So ultimately, listen to your parents more for the youth. But at the same time, I do understand that having those experiences do tie into your character building and tie into you becoming, because now you have a life experience and I can now put it onto my own kids and they're going to make their mistakes. So I do understand that, what life experience is better than actually not making mistakes, because I love my mistakes. I own all my mistakes because, listen, I'm wiser.
Well, you're here because of them.
Exactly. You see, so it really is a win. It's a 50-50, but I'm telling you, there's no need for trauma. If you listen to your parents, there's a whole lot of trauma that you will not have.
Man. So, Keisha, man, I know we're touching on so many different topics.
Yes.
And you had a point of growth, just listening to your story. There's so many layers to it, right?
Yeah.
That I'll be honest, when I saw you on Instagram, I was like, yeah, sure.
Pretty face, TikTok, dancing with my kids.
But then I followed your channel as well on YouTube.
Yes.
And I started getting into your content. And there's a video you actually did for Women's Month, which I just loved it, man. And you're talking about the virtuous wife or the
Yes,
virtuous woman,
yes.
which is in the Bible is called the
Of
virtuous
course.
wife, right? So obviously, you are married, you have your own children.
Yes.
So how is that motherhood and marriage? You know, how's that
Life-changing.
impacted you?
Yes, life-changing. And I believe that when you become a parent, because I actually became a parent before I became a wife.
Mm-hmm.
So when you become a parent, you die to yourself every single day. And it gives you more of a purpose and
Sure.
a reason to live. So when you wake up in the
Sure.
morning, no matter how you're feeling, you know that you have people watching you.
Mm.
You know that there's a bigger cause as to why you're doing what you're doing.
Sure.
So you have, and specifically me, I have a son. He's exactly like me in every way possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And my girls are obsessed with me. And I think every day I live, I always say that as a parent, children learn through living. They don't learn through telling them. You cannot tell your child. They learn so much about what you tell them, but so much more from what you do. So I believe in literally living my life as a mirror for my kids. And listen, I'm not perfect, but I try to be.
Sure.
I'm not perfect,
Sure.
but I try.
Sure.
So when I tell people, for example, and I always say, whenever you speak the truth, somebody gets offended. But at the end of the day, I always say Jesus was never liked by a lot of people. I've always got to remember that. But ultimately, any bad habit that you have, smoking, do mundane things, smoking, drinking, doing whatever you're doing, just try and preserve your kids. Even if you are somebody who smokes cigarettes, just do it on your own, Try to be the parent by doing actions. You can't sit with a cigarette in your hand and say, smoking's bad for you, you can't smoke. Do you know what I'm saying?
You smoke. Like, what do
you understand what I'm saying,
Sure.
I do believe in prayers and they work because you know what? I'm actually speaking of smoking, I'm coming from a family where my mom and dad both smoke and not one of the kids smoke cigarettes.
Okay.
So that's amazing.
Okay.
So I do believe in the power of prayer.
Sure.
And so my mother says, hey, I prayed and I covered my kids. So I believe in the power of prayer. But you know what? Turn it up a notch. Do your part as well. That's just how I feel.
Sure.
Let's not just leave everything to God. Do our part and let God do the rest. So just be a representation. And that's what I've learned in my parenting is to be a representation of what I'd like to see in my kids one day. And I trust and I hope that my kids can be a positive impact on the world. They can be the friends. When I pray, I always say, Lord, I pray that my kids are the positive influence in their friend group.
Sure.
Let them be the kids that say, let's go to church. Let them be the kids that say, oh, you're smoking. I'm going to tell y'all's parents. Be the tattletale. I want my kids to be like that.
We've demonized those kind of kids, right? We're like, you don't want to hang with those snitches.
Yes, I know, and that's fine. And that's what my son says. His mommy's, what's it? Snitches get stitches. I'm like, no, that was the bully trying to get, that was the bully trying not to get, get in trouble. The bully was so smart to tell you stitches get stitches. It's okay. You won't get stitches. Nobody's going to give you stitches, my baby. You come and you tell me. Who was picking my plants? Who was picking my flowers?
Sure.
What's his name? Tell me.
Okay.
And so ultimately, having kids is really just makes your life more joyful. It adds love and it adds so much grace to your life. And then obviously being married, I was my husband and I dated for a very long time before we got married. We actually together for I think like 14 years. We together for about 14 or 15 years, but married now this year for 5. So we're together for the 10.
That's rare, man.
Yes, and at the same time, we didn't have a fairy tale relationship.
Sure.
Oh, I knew he was the one. No, we had an extremely difficult. I always say we had a difficult girlfriend-boyfriend dating relationship, and our marriage has been godly and spiritual.
Yeah.
So I'm not one to sit and say, oh, when you see them, you just know. It's hard work. It's a lot of hard work, but I believe in grace. And I also believe that when something is not aligned with God, He won't make it work, eh? God's not going to force your things if his plan is not prevailing. He will make his will prevail at the end of the day, you know.
Sure.
I do believe that when we got married, God just said, okay, now you're in a covenant. You are in union with what I want. And I always speak favor over my life, and I know I'm favored. So God's always like, Nekisha, you always call yourself favored, but you're not married, but you got kids. There's something that's not aligning with the righteous woman, you know. And I do believe that the blessings were unlocked when we got married, and things just went from strength. We literally grew as a couple from strength to strength and glory to glory, and literally it's all on God and faith. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. So it's 5 years of a happy marriage, and I'm literally married to my best friend. Like, my husband is the best. He's so funny. I'm actually just thinking of him now.
Oh, man. I'm sure you'd be proud to hear that,
absolutely.
Man. And even like that glow on your face when you speak of it.
Absolutely. No, definitely. So, yeah.
Oh, man. I'm so grateful to hear that, because, you know, there's a big discussion going on about relationships. You know, men are this, men are no longer providers.
Yeah.
So there's a... I don't really like to get into it.
Yes.
Because, you know, it's case by case. You know, like you said now, in your relationship, it was difficult, but then the marriage is so much more blessed, right? Whereas
absolutely.
there are people who've had like the best of relationships and they marry 3-4 years. It's like,
yes.
I don't know if I want this person anymore.
And I feel like that's my husband and I. That's our strength. We always say that. We were just having this conversation not long ago. We both feel like we fought too hard in our girlfriend and boyfriend era because we both came from this broken, two humans that are completely broken. We didn't know who we were. So we were imperfect together and we were sort of causing each other trauma. And now, honestly, and then it had to take us time of separation, growth in each other's selves to come back together, to be united with God as a foundation, and we started growing, flourishing, because anything that's planted in righteousness, I'm telling you, it will grow from strength to strength, and that's just what I believe. But when you're speaking about providing and a man being a provider, I'm a firm believer of the man providing. You know, I'm a firm believer. I have traditional. I don't know if that's what we can call it, but I do have traditional beliefs that a man is a provider, and I think my husband has taught me that.
Sure.
My husband he's a born provider. He will not let me suffer. You know, he will not. There's nothing that my husband has never told me no. Never. He's never said, no, I cannot do this for you. He will just, I think the way that he says it's so lovely. Not now, babe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I can even ask him now, right? and yes, a soft no, you know, gentle no. And it's so funny because even if I tell him, even if I know that it's not something that's in our budget, he'll never say, we don't have money for this. He says, don't worry, one day I'll do it. You know, it's never, I have hope in him. You know, I have hope in the things that, because he's proven to me what he's already done. And he's proven that when we didn't have, if I can give you just a quick story that's just come on the tip of my mind. Sure. Speaking of providing, you know, we always have red flags and signs and stuff. I remember when my husband we were still taking taxis, you know, taxi life, and my husband would take a taxi in town, like Durban Central Town, and I'm sure you know them. If you're South African and you know CBD. You walk past the lady that is boiling mealies on the side of the road. So that was our thing. And then my husband would come home on a Friday or whatever. He's like, Kisha, I bought something for you. And I'm like, what? I'm running downstairs. What? I'm probably pregnant or whatever. He's like, I bought something. Come see what I got. And when I walk past this lady, it smelled so, but he also got a love for food. I smelled these mealies and maybe not every other Friday, as long as she was there, my husband's coming home with like that mealie. And how much is it? About 15 Rand or 10 Rand or whatever. Sure. And he would come with this excitement, and it's like, why do you have me? I got something for you. And, you know, and I wanted it for myself, but I bought one for you, you know. And for me, it was so cute. And, you know, you didn't care. I could have said like on the side of the road. It's
a thought, right? Like you thought of me, sure.
So from there, you always start to see the little red flags or where the person is thoughtful. So I believe in providing, and that same sort of energy has been transparent. It's been consistent through my marriage. So like I said, he never says no, and I love that, because at the end of the day, what is a man? What is a man that does not provide for his family? I just want to ask the basic necessities. I'm not saying what is a man that's not providing?
I think a man who's not providing, he'll know it, and that's why there becomes a confidence issue whenever a man can't provide, right? Because you don't need someone externally to tell you what you need to do, because you know it. It's deep down inside that, man, I need to do something here.
Yes.
That's why when we don't work, I think Dr. Miles Monroe said it, that when
I
a man...
love Dr. Miles Monroe. That is my guy. That is my guy.
Why does a man become violent when he doesn't have work? It's because he knows, there's that underlying thing that, man, I feel like less of a man because I can't do it. And maybe sometimes we're hard on ourselves because we look at the provision part as, I need to provide this fanciness. But you just simplified it now with your husband. It's like those little acts of kindness, those acts of love or thoughtfulness, and that kind of makes your provision seem a little bit different, right?
Exactly, and that's exactly what I'm saying is providing what? Providing your need-based things, and even as a I'm an educated woman. I'm driven. I have goals. I have things that I would like to achieve. I'd like to call myself a provider too. Sure. There's nothing that I would ask my husband for that I cannot provide on my own, but it wasn't always that case. There was a time where I was unemployed at home and I could sit and I could, look for work and know that my husband is providing while I'm on the pursuit. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because remember, seasons, there was actually a time during COVID, my husband's an expat. And there was a time during COVID where he couldn't fly back to the country he was working in at the time. And you know what that meant?
You had to do everything.
And I took it in my stride. And I worked. It meant me working much harder because I've honestly never taken on that amount of... I was also pregnant in 2020. I've never taken that amount of responsibility, but I done it at the end of the day, and I did it for a full year. And my husband, it's not that he couldn't work, he couldn't fly out to his job, and obviously he had to be at home. And while he was taking care of the kids for I think it was about 8 months, 6 months maybe. And in that time, I was working from home. I teach at home. My husband would cook, take care of the kids, do whatever he needs to do. I remember I never ever left the house because of COVID. And then I would literally get paid and he would go and buy the groceries and do everything. But that's what it is. That's marriage. You got to come together. You got to do what needs to be done in the moment, and don't look at this is a man's place and this is a woman's place. No. We got to do what is needed at that very moment. And if it means that a girl has to get up and get to paying the bond or get to pay the rent or pay the car, you have to do it, And I believe for me, for example, I do have quite a how can I call it? I have quite a beautiful how can I call it? A beautiful foundation of independence because my husband's an expat. So I've got to be in control all the time. I've got to say, okay, my husband's not here every day. So if I break down on the street,
I have to do something.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm able to navigate maybe in ways that other women are not used to, because somebody can just call, hey babe, this is the situation. I've met up in an accident. Okay, what's going to happen now? I need to call insurance, but who do you think I should call? Sometimes also with women, it's very difficult for us to handle situations on our own when it involves other men, mechanics, they want to overcharge us. Let's be real. In a situation where you need your husband there, I do believe that I've now come to a point where I'm able to handle anything sort of the strength that a single parent, a single mother has to endure every day. I think on some level, I'm able to handle a capacity of a single mother environment because that's how I operate every day. Is it easy? No, but at the end of the day, it's worth it because then again, your character's been built. And the more pressure, I always say the more pressure that you are able to work through and the more you have on your plate and you're able to actually execute and succeed at it, it's all for me. I'm becoming better. I'm becoming stronger. You know, I'm becoming more effective, efficient. Anything that's going to grow me, you know. You want to be somebody that is going to get the job done regardless. And I definitely want to be known to be somebody who gets the job done regardless. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I was like, I'm in love with that. Man, so Nekisha, I think this brings us to the end of our chat, man. It's such a, refreshing one. Like I say, you know, it's always special when we have a lady on the podcast.
Absolutely.
And, you know, part of why I'm also doing this is kind of break the stereotypes, right? Because if you kind of just look at whatever piece of content and you go with that because that's your chosen kind of lens to look at things, then, you know, there's a balance that we missed there.
Absolutely.
You know? So I love the perspective that you brought on, you know, the sort of the childhood you witnessed, your relationship with your father and your family, and being vulnerable about what happened with your sister. I think that's something that takes a lot of courage to do.
Yes, thank you so much.
I know you had some objections in the beginning, but then I'm grateful that you did it. And man, tell us when to watch this. The finals that are coming up. You can't let you leave without telling us that, right?
Yeah. So you guys can watch the Mrs. SA. There'll be more information closer to the time, but the finalist show will definitely be in November. I think the best thing to do is follow me on Instagram so that I can give you exact dates of exactly which day the finals will be. I'll be looking around the 16th, 17th, and 18th of November because it'll be a period over 3 days. And I think the best thing to do is to follow me on Instagram. I am Nekisha Lupke. And also follow me on YouTube or subscribe on YouTube.
Okay. We're going to put all of those links in the show notes. So we'll make sure that we share that. Nekisha, I really appreciate you for showing up. I know you're making some moves pretty soon. So we'll definitely catch up with each other. But guys, it's been a really insightful episode. I've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed too. Let us know what you think of it. Let us know what you think of Keisha's story. I think it's always a blessing to catch someone just before they go on the rise, you know? So you can claim the rights. Like, hey, you saw her on Manned Up.
Yes.
Right? But man, it's been an awesome pleasure, guys. Peace and love.
Absolutely.
See you on the flip side.
Bye.